Hi, everyone, and welcome to the ITSM crowd. It is my great pleasure today to be joined by Coté, who I'm going to ask to introduce himself very shortly. My name's Claire Agutter, and I'm the host for today's session. And we're continuing our evolution of service management theme, but I guess we're broadening a little bit today as well because we're talking about the evolution of IT and really the evolution of business as well. So we're going to get into some deep subject, I think. But first of all, Cote, I'll just ask you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, like working somewhat backwards. So, I work at VMware, and then I came in through the Pivotal acquisition there. So, I spend a lot of my time talking with I don't know, like IT people, like developers and operations and managers, executive types at large organizations, just to figure out what they're doing to get better at like building and running their own software. So, like that custom software that they use, they write
Mm-hmm.
that runs their business, like or they're not business if they're not a for-profit entity, and so I write that up and do like videos and podcasts and speak at conferences and just talk with people one-on-one about that a lot. And then I also at the moment, well, for many long moments, I think it's been like 7 years or so. I have a podcast I do with some friends called Software Defined Talk, where we talk about I don't know, stuff in the I guess you could call it like the enterprise IT world.
Mm-hmm.
As thrilling as that sounds, I mean, I guess here it is pretty thrilling. And then other just unrelated stuff that we come up with. And I don't know, previously I've been an analyst a couple of times at 451 Research, which I think is now part of like S&P Global or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a couple of years, I'm from Austin, so as I like to joke, you have to serve a 2-year compulsory service at Dell if you're in computers in Austin. So I worked there for a couple of years doing corporate strategy and M&A for software and cloud stuff, and helped do strategy for the public cloud business for a little bit when it was there. And then I was also an analyst for a long time at RedMonk, a small
Mm-hmm.
firm where I think we became aware of each other. I forget, it was a long time ago, and then I was a developer at various places for a long time before that. The last at BMC Software,
Mm-hmm.
relevant around here, and other things not related to the behavior of computers.
Brilliant. Thank you. So, for those of you watching live, please do chip in with any comments, questions. We love to hear from you as well. So, if there's anything there, pop it into the YouTube comments and we will bring it up on screen and discuss. But I guess a good place to start, our audience is mainly from the IT service management world, it's pretty global. And everybody who's been in IT or service management for more than kind of 5 years has seen enormous changes, and not just in technology, in actually how we work as well. I always think back
Mm.
to my first IT job, which was in one of the UK government departments, and all of the civil servants I worked with used to print out copies of every single email that they had and keep them in big filing
Uh-huh.
cabinets
Yeah.
just in case, and if the IT went down, it wasn't really a big deal. But obviously the criticality of IT has changed so much. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is what what do you see in terms of organizational challenges? So the companies that you're talking to, what problems are they facing, and
Mm.
why is that something that they need to be thinking about addressing?
Yeah. Well, I think so. I primarily just know about like custom written software. So, despite working at VMware, I don't really know what their end user computing deals are. Like, I mean, I'm sure in that area, as always, it's just about like securing things and trying to navigate the line between like the control and security you want people to have on their devices, and
Hmm.
like giving them software that's not terrible to use. Right? Like that seems to always be the tension, because like you're dealing with files and email and calendaring, and like the most secure like versions of those software are always pretty terrible compared to like
Hmm.
what else you can have. So anyways, um like I said, I don't really know about that area. But when it comes to like software, I mean, I think, I don't know, it's almost like in a nauseating way overstated, but it really is the case that like organizations want to use their software as the way that they not only like run their business and not only like optimize it, but the way that they like innovate. Like I just made this example up in my head. Well, I mean, based on, real stories as it were, but whatever, it's just for fictional use. But, I, because of the nature of the companies I've worked with over the years, like I often think of insurance companies, and in addition to more fun things. But and this is an illustration of like something beyond like software is eating the world and all that nonsense. But like if you're a 50, 100-year-old insurance company, which many are, insurance is a fantastic business if you can get into it. But like you've kind of like sold after 50 or 100 years, you don't really have any more market to go after, like any more huge growth. Like there's only so many people that you sell to, and they only have so many houses, cars, and liabilities they want to insure against, right? And so, and this kind of line of thinking applies to all sorts of organizations. So like, but you need growth because Wall Street doesn't care. They just want growth, right? And so like one thing to do is to come up with a new business. So, this is several years ago, but like something that really only software would enable is like if you wanted to sell like 24-hour insurance, right? Like, if I just bought like an 1,800 euro or pound or dollar like iPhone and I'm going to go to the beach, like it's probably cool if I pay like, I mean, I don't know if I would actually do this, but there probably is a significant amount of people who would pay like $20, $50 just for a day.
Yep.
That they could get it replaced. But if you think about it, I've only out of maybe 8 or 10 iPhones I've had, I've only ruined one by sitting in the ocean. and so like it's probably a pretty good business. It's free money basically for the insurance company, right? And so if you think about it, so one, that needs to be, as they say, digitized. Like you're not going to like call someone and have them do it all manually. And in fact, to make it mostly free money, it has to be completely self-service. And like, I don't know, you've got to figure out a way of balancing, like, I need to approve this in like 30 seconds and collect the money and put in a system to process claims if they come in. And all of that is done with software, right? I mean, going back to your example, it would be madness if there were filing cabinets somewhere with paper.
Yes.
And so like, it's not only like, so most organizations, right? If you use that, basically like we need some software that does this, right? So it's not only that they need that software like 6 or 12 months from now, but they need it like soon, like quickly. And then also equally importantly, when they get that software, they're probably going to find out like changes they want to make to it and ways they want to improve it. So they probably will want to like release that like, every 30 days or something, right? And obviously they're not shipping a year's worth of programming in 30 days. There's no magic about that. But whatever, they release like small little incremental things. Like, when you log into the App Store, the Google Play Store, there's always all these things that get updated, right? Because people release software. So just getting to that point where you're, you can think of a new business idea and, within a reasonable amount of time, you can have that initial launch and then you can start like studying how people are using it and improving it. That is an issue on its own. And then finishing it out, like, the third part is like running and managing it all, but I'll focus on the software part. And then the second thing is like, so then you want to work with your older systems, right? So we can go to this, or I shouldn't say older, your existing systems. And so you can think to the insurance example again, right? Like, so for example, I don't exactly know how the insurance business works, but I think one of the major things that's required is that you don't sell more insurance than you could pay out according to whatever the regulations are. I forget what that's called, but like, so I can't suddenly sell 20,000 iPhone insurance things, I guess, because that might put me over the limit, whatever it would be. So that's probably a pretty old service that you have running. It might even be on a mainframe, and now you need to interact with it in a 30-second window, right? And so, and what you can work around it so it doesn't have to exactly be 30 seconds, but I'm guessing on a 60-minute window is probably nice, right? And so that's the next thing that people encounter that I think is important is like people will call it like dealing with legacy systems or depending on the issue they have, like tech debt, right? And things like that. And so I don't know. I mean, I think those are like in the area that I spend time on, and I didn't get to the like running it part, but those are the three things of like we want to evolve the way that we're operating. We need to be able to have like a software process in place where we can actually like launch something in like 3 to 6 months instead of like a year, because all the other insurance companies are going to be selling this too. So like, as they say, we want better time to market. And then 3, you need to actually be able to update it on like, hopefully like on a weekly basis or like at most like 3 or 4 weeks, just to add like small little new features to it, right? Like, hey, why don't we insure people's like 250 euro AirPods, right? Like they might keep those in their pocket too. And like, while they're insuring their iPhone, they could just click this thing and it'll just add 5 euros to it or whatever, right? Like, and at some point, like, adding that checkbox isn't that big of a deal. And if you have the right, if you're doing software in a good way.
I've got to say that is one of the most clear explanations, I suppose, that I've had to take a business and look at, I guess, the new channels that software is opening up for organizations. And we have these companies that have been digital first, but it to me, and I think probably to a lot of people in service management, working in and with these organizations that are actually looking at changing the business model, that's almost more interesting to me, because we do have to change things. And one of the things I loved when we were prepping for this session is you were talking about roles and concepts, which I've read, I might have seen them on Twitter, but I have a limited understanding. And, things like you were talking about platform as a service, you were talking about DevRel roles, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about these changes that you see. What are the new skills? The technology is amazing, but what do you see in terms of people changes?
Yeah, so I think, for as flashy and fun as the software part is this true? I hadn't really thought about this till now, but the role that changes the least is the role of the developer. Like the developer still basically like sits at a computer and types. Right? And what they're typing is kind of, I mean, whatever, they might be using a different language, but the only thing that's a little different about what they do from a traditional role. Well, at the team level, it's different, but the developer gets involved more with what I would call the product side of it, right? So people always use waterfall as like the boogeyman term or boogie person term for this, but like, so we could say waterfall or traditional or just the opposite of what I'm talking about. But traditionally what a developer will do is they will be given instructions, requirements, to use the word, of what they should implement. And they might even have like a wireframe or a pixel perfect thing from Photoshop or Figma or whatever, and just be told, do this. Or, I want to say dumb, but the simple thing that they might be given is just like, to digitize something, like here is a PDF or a paper, just do the online version of that, right? I mean, it's kind of like just copy this thing or do it. And instead, the thing that is different about the responsibility and the roles that developers has, as I work down from the, you got moving pixels on the screen all the way down to like, hardware. Well, I'll work my way down there. But like the developer has a lot more awareness of the product that they're building. Who are the users? What are they doing? And they are more involved in determining what those screens look like and what the requirements are. And they have, they think the whole orientation that I'll get to is this whole stack of people is thinking about what they're doing as a product and thinking about their customers and thinking about it as a product in the same way. And this is like service management people kind of think this way, or are used to this, but they're thinking like vendors, right? So as vendors, like we write software to pay the bills, right? Like that is the product that we sell. And so we are very interested in whoever the buyer and secondarily the user is, knowing what they want to give us money for. And so we study that and we do what they want, right? Which is different than delivering to requirements. So going up from the developer, so you have instead of like a developer team, I would think of it as like a product team. And again, this is very much like a vendor would think. And so you have developers there, and what you have is a product manager. And I don't think the product manager role is like very, is the right word, pervasive? I don't think it happens a lot in organizations. You more have a project manager who's making sure that you're delivering the requirements, you're meeting the dates, whatever, right? Which is totally cool. But a product manager is more like, I don't like this metaphor, but it seems to be what we say. They're sort of like the business owner, right? So their job, what they are responsible for is they are responsible for two things. One, kind of three things, but one, making sure, to use this weird term, that business value is being delivered, which basically means making sure that our software is both useful for the people using it and also aligns with whatever our interests are, right? And if you're not working at a vendor, those two things usually are the same. like they, I guess you could think of online banking, right? Like, so something that a product manager and the overall team would be thinking of is we would like to retain customers. One way we can think to do that is to have a good customer experience, like that. It's like, I'm thinking of the little community bank I use, which like it'd be nice to move from them because their software is not very good. So the product manager might think like, we should make it a lot easier to do the bill pay workflow. Right. And like, so they're kind of always thinking about, again, from this kind of vendor way, like what could we do with the software to make not only it better on its own, but better in the sense of what are we doing here, right? Like who's our customers and all of that. And they might also have a designer that they work with who does, not just like this year we're doing sans serif type as opposed to like last year, but they help out with that idea of like, what's the workflow that people go through and what's the most efficient way that we could do that. So the major like responsibility shift there for the product team is, again, that ownership of a product that they're building, not just delivering to spec and just delivering what's needed there. So the way, supporting that is, the phrase people use a lot nowadays is platform engineering. Like at Pivotal and at VMware, like, going back many years, at least to 2015, we would call this platform as a product. You can see a common theme there with the word product. But again, the idea, and this is where that product mindset kind of like flows down the stack, is that the platform engineering team, they're responsible for all the usual things, which is the software should work and run, right? And like meet all these, as a developer would call it, like almost non-functional requirements, right? Like it should be secure. It needs to like follow our own compliance and other compliance. Like, the people who are responsible of compliance depends on what it is, like in that role, but whatever, right? And then also we need to diagnose problems, and more or less the platform people, the operations people, still have a huge role in basically configuration and release management, and then incident management and all of that stuff, to use the ITEL terms or whatever. But the other thing, why it's as a product, is that they are also taking on a product mentality and looking at those product teams as their customers, right? Which I think is kind of different than traditional like service delivery things, right? I mean, it's always bad to like say something doesn't think that way, because it usually does. It's just how it's practiced that often doesn't think that way, to bounce around and anthropomorphizing things. But so what they're doing, again, they also typically have like a product manager in addition to the platform engineers who build a platform and run it, which I can get into a little bit what that means. But that product manager is also making sure that what they're doing is valuable and useful with their customers, which are that product team, and then also other stakeholders as well, security and compliance people. But going through that iterative cycle starts to become what they do, where they build out the initial platform and they do the maintenance and things that you would need. But then they're always going to the developers, those product teams, and figuring out like, well, what would make your life, your job better, right? And what this amounts to is often, whether you want to call it a platform as a service or not, like building a platform as a service, which to shortchange, it means like putting in a lot of automation and self-service so that developers don't have to like talk with anyone or fill out tickets. And in order to do that, often what that means is people will say like, you put in guardrails or templates or whatever, but like you basically build like a very pleasant fenced in area for developers to use, right? Like, like the cynical way of thinking about it is, well, it's not cynical, but one way of thinking about it is that we are figuring out how to standardize and centralize things and put in controls that gives developers less choice and therefore gives them less opportunity to mess things up, right? Which,
I mean, we have talked about this, I think, in some of the projects that I've worked on, because you will have, you mentioned like with the insurance companies, there's a limit to how much insurance they can sell. If those guardrails are automatically in place, then the developers are not developing something that's not aligned with
that's a good
policy.
Point. Right. And so, so that gets down to like, and then there's the engineers who are a mixture of, depending on like if you think of like putting all of this into place, I think it's useful to think about it in like a period of time of maybe like 6 months, a year, and then 5 years. And depending on where you are in that scale, the platform engineers will, let's say, build, which doesn't necessarily mean building everything from scratch. It means, like all things in like ops and infrastructure, like, you don't really build servers and file systems anymore. You kind of assemble these parts together. And whether it's stuff that you get from a public cloud service, from a vendor like VMware, or that you actually do build on your own, the platform engineering team is responsible for building that. And then they also, especially early on, they become responsible basically for like co-developing with the product teams, because hopefully the platform engineers kind of understand how the platform works, right? They may not be great at writing applications, but they get like, when you have an application, here's how you package it and deploy it, and here's how you handle like scaling and load balancing. So like they end up doing a lot of consulting initially and co-developing with the product teams to kind of educate them up until that knowledge of how to do it kind of spreads through the organization. And then they're also responsible for just running the platform on its own. And there's a lot of talk in the DevOps world about these product teams or developers like managing their own stuff in production. And I don't know. Over the past 10 years, I haven't really found that's much of the case. like one, I think developers got smart and they're like, that sounds like a horrible job. So I do not want to do that, right? Like, And two, it just like, I don't know. I think there's a little bit more control and insight, so to speak, developers have into stuff in production, but I'm not really convinced that that happens. Maybe there's a survey out there, but so operations people still end up doing that quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, and those are the, what I kind of leave off there is there's still, depending on if you're like all in on public cloud or you do on-premises stuff or more, 99% of the time, I don't know if it's 99, the extreme majority of the time, like organizations I talk with, you do all of that. There's still, you need to manage your infrastructure, right? Like you have to, you need to use the three AASs, like you still need infrastructure, right? And whether that's, again, your on-premise stuff that you're probably, probably got VMware stuff scurrying in there. You might have other sort of ways of running your infrastructure, all your networking and storage. You have all of that to manage like on a global scale, or even if you've kind of like removed some of that work by running it in a public cloud, like you still need to manage your usage of that, right? So, and is this the case? I think maybe that function, that's usually not the platform team that does that, but that function, I don't actually know what goes on there very much, but I would suspect it also hasn't changed that much, right? Like it's still computers down there, but I'm an application person, so I just kind of minimize anything below me. Yeah, and then finally, I didn't define this, but the platform itself, I mean, it's like, it's basically the runtime environment for the applications. And then often it's two other things. It's there's not a better word. I was talking with someone about this yesterday. There's not a new word for this. So I'm going to use the old word, which I assume is the current word, which is all the middleware, like the databases, the services, for example, that in the insurance example you would use to check what, I think they call it their book, right? That you would check how much insurance that you can use, the services, all of that kind of stuff. So that usually is built into the platform, or at least how to access and use it is kind of like built into the platform, if that distinction makes sense. I mean, basically a platform is if you were to go as a developer to the public cloud and just start using it, like that's what a platform is, right? Like it's all of that stuff managed for you. And then finally, and then I'll stop my wall of words here, but like, the other thing that has become very apparent for a while now is that platform engineering team, largely in order to enforce those things, those guardrails or templates or whatever we were talking about earlier, it's also generally very helpful for them to be in charge of, to have the responsibility of the developer tools. So the tools that are used to build the software, the tools that are used to verify them, the way that the software is packaged, is configured and packaged up for release. Like the more control the platform team operations people have over that, again, we'll put it the two ways. The more they can help the developers just focus on their application stuff, and then the more that they can stop developers from having to do the stuff on their own. And even if they don't screw it up from introducing variability and yet another way to do this, that then the operations people have to like learn and pay attention to, right? I mean, I think I found over the years that variability is like maybe one of the top three causes of crap in IT. Like it's bad. And so you want to reduce that as much as possible.
That is amazing. I always say at the end of these, the 30 minutes goes so quickly, but genuinely so much food for thought there. I have got a million follow-up questions, but it's fascinating to me. And I think there's so much that the service management world needs to make sure it's talking to the development world, the DevOps world, the agile world. And there's kind of lessons learned both ways, but I can't thank you enough for coming on and just sharing some of those ideas, which, they'll be new to a lot of our audience, but it's absolutely where we need to be thinking, particularly, for the organisations that need to change how they do business. So huge thank you for that.
Yeah. It'd be. I mean, I haven't heard. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing. I'm always curious to hear the other side because I used to know in the 2000s what was going on and talk with people in the service management world, but I've since like gotten distracted by shiny objects and breadcrumbs, right? And so like it is. I always wonder what's going on there, and so it'd be cool to hear that as well. What's happening on that side? I wish I talked with those people more, but I don't like. There's no like ITSM days like there is DevOps days that I can encounter.
Yep. There's the ITSMF UK conference coming up in November in the UK, but certainly the DevOps community is wonderful to be around, and the ideas that get shared at DevOps Days are fantastic.
You'll have to tell me some conferences to submit talks to, and then I can have a reason to go other than my own curiosity. That's hard to put on justification of an expense report. I was interested.
That's the advantage of running your own business. You go, oh, that looks interesting. I'm going to go there.
Totally.
The next episode of the ITSM crowd is not set in stone yet. So for those of you watching, if there's anything that you've got a burning desire to learn about, drop me a line on Twitter. And you will also find Coté on Twitter and LinkedIn and the usual platforms if you've got any follow-up questions for him. But thank you so much, everybody, for watching today. Coté, thank you so much. That's been just beyond interesting for me, so hopefully for everybody else. And I will see everybody on the next episode of the ITSM crowd. Thank you.
Bye-bye.